Yeah.
There you go. All right, we'll go ahead and open the meeting. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, if you're so inclined. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, good evening, everybody. Today is October 23rd, 2019. We're here at the West Rutland School for the Greater Rutland County Supervisory Union Board meeting. First is the approval of the agenda. If you guys could look over the agenda, let me know if you have any changes, additions. I have two changes that I'm going to propose, which is to move old business, the superintendent search, and the contract negotiations, which we are restarting again now, into a quick executive session at the end under both personnel and contract issues. And so what we'll do is we'll put those items on for the end of the evening, get everybody out of here and finish on those two topics. So it's just off the record. I don't know if anybody has any concerns.
Number 6, we need to add D, warrants, and E, expenditure report. They're in your board packet, they just weren't on the agenda.
Well, warrants are under consent agenda. Are they different warrants?
No,
Okay,
you're right. Take it
so
out.
D could just be,
Just expenditure report,
okay.
yep.
Any other changes, additions, deletions?
Motion to approve the agenda with the changes and additions.
Second by Jim. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Any public comments, general comments, anything from the floor? The neighborhood is quiet this evening. All right, let's see, the minutes of September 25th.
So can I just, it's my understanding we can approve the consent agenda without going through each 3 things. They've all been provided in your packet. A motion to simply approve the consent agenda gets us out of that and moves us on, unless someone has a question or chooses to take it out for discussion.
I believe that is actually correct in the official
Okay.
way to do things, so.
So it seems like we spend a lot of time under that, and it's listed as consent agenda,
Got a
so
motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second to that?
A second.
Second by Eric. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Could we discuss
Oh.
on the minutes, we need to fill in, just to fill in the blank, under 9 adjournment, last page. I believe that the motion to move out of executive session was by consensus, and the notes over here indicate that the adjournment was at 8:41 PM, but we don't have, if anyone could recall who motioned to adjourn. and second.
I made the motion, but, yeah. Yeah.
We'll let Meredith second it. She was eager to leave that night.
Yep.
Well, maybe it was reversed, maybe Meredith.
I didn't, I was already,
It was unanimous, I can tell you
Oh,
that.
yeah. For sure.
Alrighty.
All right, so subject to that change, I got a motion on the floor, seconded by Eric. Any further discussion? Call a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Perfect. Motion carries unanimously. Personnel, resignations.
Oh, yes, we have 2. Anya Matthews is a West Rutland school para, resigned at 9:30, and Jessica Bordeaux, tooth tutor, resigned effective 10/16/19.
Motion to accept the resignations.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Contract recommendations.
They're in your packet. Would you like me to read them out loud
Nope,
for the camera?
unless anyone has any questions.
No, just as long as they can be recorded in the minutes as presented.
Do you have a copy? Yes, okay.
I do have one question. I just wanted, of course, I gotta find it in the packet. I read it wrong. just the salary on one person. The one that was extremely high. I don't want to say the name. It was
The
in,
hourly rate,
yeah, the professional staff, the second one.
69.67 an
Oh, I'm
hour.
sorry, yeah, the fourth one, I'm sorry. The therapist.
I think that's the position we've had trouble filling now for quite a period of time that's remained unfilled. We've been down at least one or two across the district, is my
But
understanding.
I'm just looking at the hourly rate. And a little concerned, what are you talking about for hours and?
I think you're out of no benefits if it's a part-time.
This is a non-benefit position, it's part-time, and this is consistent with what these positions get
have been
paid. Yeah.
Okay, that's just what I needed to know, because I just looked at that and it was like,
I
wow.
think typically they've been at like $75 an hour minus the cost of FICA and taxes, the taxes, which works out to be that 69, 67.
Okay.
3/4 of the board is gonna resign and go back to school to be an occupational therapist starting tomorrow.
There you go.
Any other questions, discussions?
I make a motion to approve the contract recommendations for staff.
I will second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Finance, we have to approve some sub-grants. Was there, I think we need a motion that's in here.
I think I know a copy of it.
So all of our federal money comes to the SU. If any of that money is being spent at a district level, then the SU has to sub-grant that money to the district. And then both the SU has to approve, both the SU and the district have to approve that sub-grant. So this is kind of a holdover from Rutland Southwest, where all of the title positions were grant funded. This is the last one that's left. So it's kind of, we're gonna, all new positions are gonna be SU employees, but until all of the old positions run out, we're gonna continue the sub-granting. So this is the last position. When this position, no longer exists, then it will no longer be sub-granting.
So since we don't have this in our packet, what is the grant, or what is it, the position?
I thought there was a copy of it in the packet.
I don't see it, maybe it's just
Okay,
me.
so this is a Title I grant, and it's for an interventionist at Polteny Elementary School. The amount is $91,000, and it covers 75% of the interventionist salary and benefits. I do have it here, you can pass it around if you'd like.
Nothing new, just the only one left.
Correct. I mean, so we're receiving the federal money at the SU level. The money is being spent at the district, so the SU is giving the district the money to spend. It's not costing either district any money. It's all title money that's being spent.
Okay.
Right. So the motion is what, to accept to allow the SU to sub-grant to Quarry Valley?
Yes.
So I'll make that motion.
Probably best if someone else seconds that.
Have a second to that motion?
Second.
Second by Jim. Any further discussion, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Hey,
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Budget.
Yeah, I was just wondering, we won't go out of line. We'll just do the budget instead of the assessment schedule. Lewis?
Are we
Floor is yours.
moving into budget, or do we want to do everything else first and come back to the budget at the end? Clean up all these little things?
That's what I was just pondering doing, if you want to do that.
Did anyone want to see the sub-grant information on that side?
Sure, you can pass it over.
Thank you. So why don't we do this? Why don't we move on, go ahead and violate our vote anyway. We've only been here for 15 minutes, we're already going out of order.
I can do budget now if you like.
No, that's okay. I was actually thinking, we might as well get rid of these smaller items if we can real quick, and, because the budget, I think, is gonna take more than 10 minutes that we have allotted. So,
Obviously, we didn't look
Yeah,
at that when
thank-
we did
I was
the
gonna keep
agenda.
this strict to that 10 minutes too.
Oh, you were?
Okay, I think we should put another 0 there.
The 10 minutes might take my question.
So, assessment schedule, I put this on the agenda because we've been having issues since the merger with cash flow at the SU. So many things have moved to the SU level, and the only revenue we have, or the main source of revenue we have, is the assessment revenue. There's also been some changes at the state level where all of our grants, federal grants, are now on a reimbursement method rather than being advanced the money. So we have to submit quarterly or reports or periodic reports in order to get that money, so there's a delay in receiving that money. In the past, prior to actually the merger, it's not a result of the merger, it's just a coincidence, they used to be able to give you advances, so you could, for title funds, you can say, I'd want $75,000 in advance, and they would give you that money to spend. So, right now, we're doing the assessments quarterly on the first of every quarter, and the cash flow is fine for the first 2 months of the quarter, but come that third month, we're really struggling and having to hold off paying vendors to be able to make payroll, kind of scrounging around to be able to find enough cash until that next quarter comes along.
So July and October are fine if you're paying by quarter, third quarter is January.
Not the third month of the quarter, I'm sorry if I misspoke, the third month of each quarter. So July and August are fine, then September's really tough, then we do the October and November is fine, December gets tough. So it's the third month of each quarter, we're starting to run out of that assessment revenue. So I'm proposing adjusting that assessment schedule and doing it July 1st, and I actually have it in my budget documents.
Just basically do it the first month of each quarter, correct?
It's the first month of the quarter, but I'm looking at moving it up. So I would like to do it July 1st, and then September 1st. And then November 1st, and I don't want to misspeak here. So July 1st, September 1st, November 1st, and February 1st. So we'll be all done with assessments in February rather than April 1st.
What's the current schedule?
July, October, January, and April, the first of each of those months.
So you're maintaining the quarterly schedule, you're just shifting it to the middle of, basically, right?
Sorry, yeah, it's 2 months in between each one.
Instead of the,
And there's 3 months there's 3 months in between November and February.
So are you changing the amount you're pulling, or you're pulling the same amount?
I'd be looking to pull the same 25% for each assessment, so still do 25% assessments, quarterly assessments, just not quarterly calendar-wise.
does it have any effect on the local districts?
Say, are we gonna have
The local districts are able to borrow through their tax anticipation notes. They're already doing that. We go out to borrow each year, and so there's money that's available for them. The supervisory union is not able to borrow. We're legally not able to do that.
So let me just be clear though, so we're gonna borrow off all the bonds for a month or two in order to pay this at this schedule and pay whatever interest is on that now, correct?
Correct. You would be borrowing off your tax anticipation loans. So
So-
there would be a little
Numbers
bit
of-
of an interest expense at the local level to cover those.
Do you run any numbers on the interest expense to the local levels?
I did not. Our rate's usually low 2%. And depending on, we're borrowing now the minimum that we have to borrow just to get by at the local district, so I'm trying not to borrow too much, so I'm looking at what our expenses are, doing small draws each time we need it. I'm not gonna lie, there's gonna be a small expense, but it's really a struggle at the SU to make payroll, and there's really not a lot of options.
No, the thing that I'm slightly concerned about too is the time that you're spending on figuring out who to pay and stopping
A lot
your
of time.
process there and trying to figure out who to pay and who we can't pay and all this stuff that's being done for no reason when you really should be focusing in on.
Come that last month of each quarter, I'm spending a great deal of time trying to figure out what I could bill, how I could bill, try to find $400,000.
So the bond's low enough. Does anybody have an idea of crunching numbers to what this might cost the local levels?
You're looking at, so for like say Corey Valley, if the assessment is 700,000, you're talking about
2% for 1
1 month,
month?
2% of times 700,000 for 1 month.
For 1 month.
So you're talking about a few $100s probably. And they're the biggest assessment.
So are you saying just do the borrow July 1st, which we're already doing, and just borrow more to start? Because we already do that.
We already borrowed July 1st.
Yeah.
We do take a draw July 1st to be able to make the first assessment and to be able to make your own payrolls.
Right,
And
because
so-
you don't get taxes from local
Yep.
communities, and they pay their first round of taxes in August. So,
It depends on the district, so right now, we're not having to borrow too much for the second assessment, but we would have to borrow that in advance to make that second assessment, because a lot of the money starts coming in September for the local districts, and it's pretty significant money. So, I mean, we could pay back some of that line of credit draw once we do get that tax money, so that we're only holding that balance for a short period of time.
How long did it, when did you notice this pattern was affecting you first?
The first quarter of last year. And so I had many discussions last year with my staff, with Deborah, Christine, because vendors were calling, looking for money in that third quarter. I mean, and they have to wait. We have to make payroll first, so tuition payments were late for special ed, mostly special ed, related like tuition payments to VAC and Lehigh, transportation.
Are you aware if other supervisory unions are facing the same issues?
Cash flow is an issue statewide, and there's been a push to try to get so that the SUs can borrow money, and that's been an issue or something that we've been trying to work on with the legislators for years, but nothing's come of it.
This seems like a reasonable fix for a problem that we can't afford to either bounce or spend time answering.
Are we getting penalized on anything we're withholding?
The only thing we've ever paid late fees on is the credit card. That's the only one that has strict payment rules, and we really don't have any say on that one. But we don't generally pay late fees or interest for regular vendors. It's kind of the cost of doing business with the school.
With the vendors, how much emphasis has been put on shopping for discount terms or extended payment terms? As I'm now starting to approve the warrants, et cetera, and I look at most of the invoices, they're pretty standard for no discounts and 30-day terms. Has there been a big push to try to, say, send out a blanket statement letter to all the vendors saying, take these terms?
Increase, I mean, a lot of them may say 30 days, but, I mean, normally our payroll is processed, depending on when we receive it, like when the bill comes in. So we process every 2 weeks, and it takes about a week to process, meaning getting signatures and getting the check out the door and getting it to the vendor. It takes about, let's say a week, just rounding, just a few days to get signatures. So if we get the invoice the day before we're gonna process, then vendors usually have their check within a week or so. If we get the invoice the day after we process, then vendors have to wait 3 weeks. So generally, vendors are paid within a week or 3 weeks from when we receive the invoice, anywhere between in that window. Some other delays that could occur is if the invoice is going to the school, how long it takes the school to get it from the school to central office. So whether it sits at the school, sits on somebody's desk, or for some reason or another, sits in inter-office mail. And that's kind of an unknown as to how long that happens. But once we receive it, unless there's an issue with it, then it's generally 1 to 3 weeks, depending on when we receive it.
So would that process more or less eliminate the possibility for early payment discounts terms just because of how much time?
Yeah, it's not really something we can commit to.
Okay.
I mean, vending prices are usually very competitive, and at least that's what I find in the technology realm with.
Yeah, so not really price, more the payment terms, right? Instead of 30 days, 90 days. I mean, 90 days domestic is kind
But
of unheard
vendors are
of, but
also-
45 even?
Like he said, vendors are very understanding, and they usually don't keep us to a lot of the payment schedules that they would keep, in the private sector.
Even though it says 30 days, we pay it when they get their money when they get it, and we don't pay, unless it's the credit card, we don't pay interest or fees.
Do you need a motion
I
from
don't
us
have a
tonight?
problem with that. I'd make a motion to amend the assessment schedule as Louis described to July 1st, September 1st, November 1st, and February 1st for quarterly payments.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Have a second to that motion?
Second.
Eric. Eric? Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. And once the December tax payments come in at the districts, there's really no cash flow issues at the district level, because there's usually plenty of cash at the district level. So it's really just the beginning of the year for them as well.
Let's quickly skip to new business, job descriptions, teacher, paraprofessionals.
We have expenditure report for D under,
Oh, that's, I'm sorry, yeah,
Finance.
you're right, D,
report.
expenditure report. Who had that? Yourself or?
that was an amendment that I, beginning.
No, but
Oh,
who's
who's
covering
gonna
it?
talk about it?
Yeah, who's covering
Louis,
it?
you wanna talk about it, or you want me to?
What's that?
The expenditure report, just real quick.
That's just an FYI. I don't really talk about it.
Okay,
Perfect. Anybody want to
If
hear
there's any
about it?
questions, I can answer questions, but unless there's a forecast, which I do periodically, then I don't usually.
Moving on, new business, job descriptions, teacher and paraprofessionals.
okay, so these have been on the agenda, you've had a chance to look at them. There is one change in the classroom description. When we went to the Quarry Valley meeting on Monday, it was proposed, if you look at the paraeducator description, there's a little section under essential duties where it says the tasks listed in this section are representative of duties assigned to positions in this class. This list is not intended to be an exhaustive list of all the tasks assigned to positions in the class, and it is not expected that all of the tasks listed are necessarily assigned to all positions in the class. So it was proposed that we put the same disclaimer, if you will, on the teacher description. So that is the only change since the last time. That will also mean, I think, for Wellsprings, we may have to revote and add that amendment at your next meeting. So I have to remember that for your agenda. And that's it. And we've been looking at these for a couple months now, and
We don't need to take any action on this tonight, correct?
We do.
need
we
to
should.
approve it.
We do
It's
need
been
to
about
approve.
3 months. Yeah.
So motion to approve as presented.
Second.
Second to that. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
So that was for both?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously. In proxy.
Proxy. So on November 7th and 8th is the annual VSBA, VSA Fall Conference. And at that conference, they have business meetings of various organizations, including VHI, which is the Vermont Education Health Initiative. And they are having their annual meetings. One is for health, and the other is for dental. And as a board, you have a voting right. You get one vote for your board. And they you can designate a proxy. There's 2 ways you can do it. One is to designate a person who is going to the meeting anyway and can vote on behalf of the board. And the second is that you can designate your proxy to VHI and they will vote on your behalf. So I am attending, Clarence is attending. You can designate one of us as the proxy, or you can designate it to VHI. But it would be
So-
nice if you had a vote, one vote for the GRCs.
Motion to designate Judy as our proxy vote.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Contract negotiations has been moved. Building Search Committee. minutes correctly.
So that would be me.
Lisa wants to speak.
So we discussed this at Quarry Valley in light of the issues that have transpired near our SU headquarters. And we've had some, as we all know, it's not in the most desirable location to begin with in Rutland. And when we voted this a year back, 2 years back, to re-up the contract, there was a great deal of discussion here. And so some of us were rather adamant that it was not the best selection, but no real work had been done to look at an alternate selection. And so based on the recent events and the value that we place on safety and the amount of money and grants that we've received in our buildings and even within the SU, I think it would behoove us to create a building search committee, whatever you want to call it. And going around is the square footage and the parking, the number of spaces, number of employees. And to start with, to look within our own communities to see if there are spaces that are available. And to also grant Judy the authority to meet with our current land owner and to see if he has alternate space that we could transfer to because we still have a lease. There were also a list of improvements that were to be made by him that, Louis, correct me if I'm wrong, that he has not fulfilled his responsibility. And
Correct.
if you've been in the building, in Judy's office, I mean, you see that it's in rather poor shape. There's holes that look like they've been, I don't know, plastered over.
All of the windowsills
Are
are
rotting
rotting.
in.
and,
Yeah.
There's no paint left on them. And whenever it rains, the water's coming into those windowsills and there's cracks underneath the windowsills where the paint is bubbling. And actually,
Water
at
coming
the
down to the
last
ceiling.
rain that we had, it actually exploded all over the floor.
Yeah.
There was so much water built in, it was like a big bubble. One of our contract books got ruined because the floor was soaked. So, I mean, there's damage being caused.
Yeah,
by
and the primary is the parking is a significant issue. I mean, we have people parking over at the railroad station, particularly this time of year when you're leaving in the dark. That's not a desirable location to begin with. It's not well lit. And we all know without saying the kind of activities that transpire in that area. And I just feel like that we have a responsibility to our SU employees and to the board itself when we go there for negotiations or for anything, that we are in a safe environment or an environment that we have done our due diligence to make sure that it's the safest. We have some buildings opening in, some of our communities due to closures of other facilities. So, before we get into this position where we have a contract put in front of us again, we pay, $69,000 for, to be there. I think
Was that the yearly rate, by the way? Just
Yes.
the 69,000 a year.
69 change. Yeah.
Yeah. But but that doesn't include, we're paying heat, right?
We don't pay heat, we pay electricity.
Electricity, I'm sorry, electricity. So, while the SU cannot own property, there is the opportunity for an individual district to be a property owner. So that's always an option. But there may just be an option within a community, and we've talked about this before, about keeping or moving to a community, one of our local communities. So I think just combined with the safety issue, with the lack of his responsibility to do his due diligence and make the improvements, that we should create a committee, or we should task each member of this board, since we all come from a different community, with assessing the community that you live in and coming back to the next meeting with facilities that fall within the parameters of the handout that you just received.
Whose responsibility is it to make him hold to his lease, to the lease agreements?
Well, we've signed the lease as a board, that, this board signed the lease.
I just,
So Judy
at
would
the
be
end
in
of the day, I think someone just needs to pen him a letter and send him
was
down a
gonna
letter,
call.
lay it out, and I think that Mr. Foley will take care of that. so
There
I'm
was
not-
actually a letter that was drafted by Cheryl Scarzello when she was the business manager, and that was back, almost now 4 years ago.
Was it sent?
How is
It was
this,
sent to Mark Foley with a list of all the things that he said he was gonna correct, which had not been corrected, and some of those same items are still on the items to be corrected list.
And as I recall, when we said and discussed the contract, that was one of the issues. Although it did pass by majority, there were 2 opposing votes to signing that contract. That was a point of contention. So, you know,
I'm sorry, it was actually from Deborah in October
was from Deborah.
2014. It was
The-
CC'd to
you know,
Cheryl.
he owns other pieces of property. Maybe there's something
And
that
there's
we haven't
no
up.
penalty if we find another property through him if we get out of our lease early.
Yes,
Right.
and
That
this
might
one
be
runs
the
to
first
2023.
I believe
we have
we
2
asked
more
him
years.
about other
23.
property.
And he didn't have anything
He
big
didn't
enough.
have anything.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Judy should write him,
Yeah, I
let
will.
him know that this board met and not very happy about the conditions not being met that he said would be. But that has nothing to do, I think, with the search committee. I think that's a separate issue. I think,
Absolutely.
But,
what
you
is
know,
the, I'm sorry, Lynette.
that's okay, I'm done.
Continue. Are you?
Mhm.
What's the penalty if we break the lease early? Can you
1
remind
year.
me?
1 year.
1 year.
1 year's rent or lease?
Yep.
It's
And that's an
significant.
awful lot of money, so.
Yeah, it is, it's a lot.
Well, I just want to comment, I mean, here's what my thought is, give them 30 or 60 days to to fix the defects, and if they're not fixed after 60 days, withhold the rent and then spend it fixing ourselves. And that's it, and plain and simple, that's just the way to handle it. But I think he'll be respectful, a 2014 letter is just.
Mark is usually
went
really
by.
good. I'm
We're not gonna have an
surprised.
issue, I think, with Mark if he gets the letter, and then, like I said, after 60 days, and we need to fix these issues, take care of it ourselves and pay it out of the rent. There's enough that's going out there, but I think he'll take care of it, it probably just needs to get put back on his radar, with so much going on, so.
Well, it was put back on his radar when we signed the Lisa renewal
Right.
this past, in 2018.
Yeah.
It was a list of things that were supposed to be corrected by November of 2018.
Yep.
And those same things are still on.
Like I said, we'll just bring it back to his
One more
attention and
time.
let him know.
One more time, and then after 60 days, take the rent
Then
and fix
we'll-
the problems
yeah.
ourselves. And so the,
Keep that on the agenda then, Matt?
yep,
'Cause I
just
think
follow
we
back
should-
up on that too. So I think, I mean, we should do a committee, but I did want to just make one comment that I just don't agree about the safety concerns down there in the area, and I'll just say that I have challenged this when it came in Rutland. I went after the mayor about it years ago when they talked about the high crime and all the drug problem in Rutland and everything else. I don't appreciate it, because I could walk across Rutland City at 3 AM in the morning from one side to the other and not have a single problem. And I just feel like sometimes we get pegged as another city, Springfield, Massachusetts, or someplace else, and I don't believe that Rutland is that big of an issue. We had an issue there. Obviously, there was a shooting out front, that was police, but that could have happened on anybody's doorstep, wherever that car happened to take place. I'm not aware of a safety issue taking place with a member of the staff at all there at that building. So I just hate to peg Rutland in that light, because I've lived
So-
here my whole life.
There
and-
have been a couple.
I'm not even pegging it,
confrontations.
uh,
You're a
ba-
big man,
base.
Matt.
Well, no, that's, but
And
there's
we
been a
have a
couple
lot
of,
of
there
women
has
in
been
that
an issue.
building.
I just was never aware of a
So-
I want to
single.
point that out too, for you and I have
Single.
one situation, if we walk through there versus,
Well, I just wasn't aware of a
Tons of
single
other
issue
people.
taking place either, so.
Well, that was,
No,
So I'm gonna say that not even referencing the shooting, I just use that because that's the most recent thing. But, not being someone that parks there, but having to go in and, sign multiple things. Rarely is there a place to park in the parking lot, so you have to find, it's even difficult to find on-street. So you end up parking illegally, I guess, to a certain degree, in the Walmart back parking lot near the train station. Not that I feel threatened, but,
I just park on the sidewalk, but you can park where you want. to.
okay. I like to have my car there when I come back out. There, I have witnessed, multiple, illegal activities transpire, while I am parking my car, getting out. I mean, I'm not I don't want to speak ill of Rutland, but let's not be naive. The train station area is not a premier location to be hanging out in.
Let me say, during the day, there are very few, very, very few problems.
Well,
And I speak from experience because you forget where I work.
no, I'm not,
And at night,
But everything
yes,
isn't
at night,
reported.
behind Walmart is not a good place. But neither is any mall or plaza at night behind, okay? And it's not that I'm defending Rutland, believe me, if nothing else, I know exactly what happens there. But it's, during the day, you're safe. The only thing you're gonna run into are handful of transient drunks, and they can get mouthy, but they've never attacked anybody. But I just want, that's all I can say. I can't go into any more detail, especially about the shooting, but it's not that bad, unless you're talking strictly at night, and at night, there is no parking issue, because you can park at just about anywhere down there at night.
Second question, you had mentioned there may have been a couple of incidents. Were there something that you were aware of, or was it just some arguments, or?
So last year, there was an incident which resulted in us applying for a $10,000 safety grant through Visbit, which we did receive. So we spent about $11,000 on safety improvements in the building last year because of that incident. We added cameras internally and externally, externally facing the parking lot. We had the landlord put in some more lighting for the parking lot. And then we also added the electronic door fobs downstairs and upstairs, and some buzzers. So the upstairs is locked pretty tight. It's just a matter of people can still get in the building and the stairwell.
And those are your
But has there been
transients.
has there been any assaultive behavior or threats?
The incident was not inside the building, it was in the parking lot, and it didn't go so far as an assault, but it was, staff members felt
Was this a third
uncomfortable.
party or a parent, by the way?
Third party.
Third party.
And I've had 2 staff members tell me of incidences where they've been approached in the parking lot.
with the situation.
Yes.
Well, it's the
Well,
back
yeah.
alley, it's the back alley mainly
Exactly.
where you would encounter drunkards, spilling out from. They're generally harmless, but I do not feel, I do feel like most of the staff in the central office, if they were to report if they feel safe, if they're working late and leaving late and it's dark and they're going out into the parking lot or wherever they wind up parking, like you said, it's not the best situation. And most report that they do not feel safe for whatever reason.
And these incidents were reported, correct?
To the police? I
No,
don't
they
believe so.
they were told to me after the fact. Like, one of them
They need
was
to
last
report,
year,
okay,
and one
I'm
of
just,
them
this goes for everywhere, not just Rutland. You have to report it. You don't report it, we can't address these people. Believe me, they have more no trespass orders against them from most of the city, so it narrows it down, so.
Gotcha.
Okay, but just saying, you need to report it, or this would continue, and by them, it's just like here, word of mouth, they're all gonna show up at the same
The
place.
2 that came to me were when people started being concerned, and then they told me after, like, it wasn't reportable by then.
And anybody that is leaving late, I don't know what late is, but if they don't feel safe, you can always call, and they'll come down and sit in the lot while you get in your car. That's not a problem either.
I will share that with everyone, because that is a concern that's been expressed, because we do have a number of people that
We do
work-
that,
And with, daylight savings ending.
yep.
Right
We
around the
understand, it's
corner.
not good, we go to work in the
Good to
dark,
know.
come
We
home
will
at
share
dark.
that tomorrow.
So that's good for the board to be aware of that. Moving on, I think it's best that we leave this to a committee instead of just board members going out and coming back. So I don't have a desire to be on the committee. The only reason is I do a lot of real estate law in Rutland, work with banks, people. But I'm also aware that when we talked about this a couple of years ago, that no one even had another suggestion on the map for us. There was not even another choice. So I would say the committee would be a great idea, and whoever's interested in that, I think we certainly need someone on there from
I think we
Pulteney.
talked about the mall, actually.
That's actually
Private
gonna,
run
that's
mall.
actually gonna come down, so it
That's
wouldn't be.
Well,
gonna
I'm
be
just
a
saying,
change,
there
so.
were other
Right.
places talked about.
Well,
At
they're
the time-
rebuilding, it's gonna be
At the
rebuilt
time,
like
we
a
were
Church
discussing
Street
trying to
station.
locate it in
Church
one of our
Street in Burlington.
communities.
And there's
They're-
two colleges that have closed. I mean, one that is not in our community, but it's closer with better parking. Nobody liked this lease. This has.
No, I don't think anybody
stunk.
liked it. It
No,
was
we just
For a
didn't
long
have a
time.
choice.
Well,
And we looked at the cost of
hadn't
moving
really done
everything
our
and
due
technology
diligence of
and-
search either. It was, the contract came and it was, there was no committee. There was just one person saying that they couldn't find anything that was suitable. That was the essence of the conversation.
At
so.
that time, I don't, I have less doubt that that was inaccurate at that time, but things have changed.
Yep.
And,
So what I
I
would
think
say
that you
is-
should form a committee, Matt.
So who wants to be on the committee? The question. So Lisa, sounds like you were.
Sure, I'm
you're-
happy to be on the committee.
Proctor, do we have someone from Pulteney or Middletown in that area? I don't think they're gonna have a lot of commercial buildings in the Middletown area, but it would be nice to have someone that's familiar with Pulteney.
Green Mountain College.
Yeah.
The,
Myself and Kristen Ross. Kristen Ross is on our Corey Valley board. We were sort of leaning in her direction in the Corey Valley.
And Kristen's.
But I will absolutely help her with that as well.
Anybody else that wants to be on that board?
I'd just like to be on the, whenever there's a place to be assessed,
Sure.
to be on the assessment
Yes.
part.
Review.
Yeah, if it's
Funny,
gonna
Greg.
cost us $1
Rewiring
million
an
to bring it
entire
up to
building is
date
not
on
gonna
the,
be
yeah.
pleasant, so.
Because we obviously need,
That was one of the factors of why we stayed, because
Right.
the network was
Was.
already there and it was just expanding it and
well, we were
elsewhere
going
and
through the
upgrading it.
merger, and really in downtown Rutland, there were not a lot of rental properties available that fit an office of our size or
Right.
our proposed size at the time. So, and I don't think anybody wanted to really deal with it. So, it's not surprising it rolled over last time.
Not everybody can move a whole SU.
There was a lot
single-handed.
going on 2 years
Other
ago.
than
The
two
original lease that actually doesn't end until this year. But the reason it was renewed at that time, though, was because Deborah wanted to add the downstairs
The
space.
downstairs had to be added, yep, we were running out of room and.
And a
The,
lot
so
of people,
we
a lot
have-
of people back then wouldn't even talk. They didn't want to come down to the square footage amount, if you remember, because I think they were talking like they had met with Tenny Brook, and he wouldn't even talk to us because he wanted an exorbitant amount square foot. But you may find some out there now with businesses closing down, colleges closing down. There could be some hungry people out there.
So we've got two people on the committee, anybody else? Anybody else that wants to be on that? I mean, I don't even think the committee has to meet. If you guys do a roundtable on the phone,
Yeah.
emails back and forth with each other and say, hey, I found this building, let me know what your thoughts on it are, and just shoot an email back and forth, but.
I mean, because it could take years. And finding a bill, it's not gonna happen in the
But at
4
least to have a
months.
few people out there with eyes in the community and looking around, I think would be beneficial,
Yeah.
so. So Lisa, another person from Corey Valley, anybody else?
Lisa, Kristen, Seth. I thought, did you volunteer?
He did.
Okay. Did you volunteer, Kristen?
I did
He
just
did.
volunteer,
Yes.
Kristen. I
But
was
we-
leaning
but
heavily
we-
in her direction the other day.
Shall I ask her?
She said the other night she would be.
She would? Oh,
yeah.
okay.
If it,
Just
Maybe
checking.
we could approach the Wells Springs other board members to see if they would be
Yeah,
interested.
sure, yeah.
Um,
Because I know that you guys are all serving on committees currently.
Yeah, maybe, yeah. I'm not gonna put
Okay.
anybody's name on the list, but,
I'm
you
gonna
know,
do a little
someone might be.
Wellspring section here.
I mean, it's really about sending around an email, because, the truth is that everybody's here at this board. If anybody sees a building out in the community, email Lisa. Let them know, and that'll start a discussion on it, and then people can look into it
Yeah,
further.
it's really
and the
just
committee can
gathering
do that,
information at
because
this point, I think.
The issue we ran in last time, I don't think we could identify a single one. But, at the same time, there wasn't a lot of time, as Greg noted, people were really of an interest to
And
go out.
that-
I don't think anyone spoke to Jean Cole in town.
Nope.
I know we talked to, Foley about what other properties he had available. DeForge was too expensive, which is all those plazas on the north side of Main Street. We really wanted something in West Rutland, because this is a nice middle ground anyway, between here and Castleton anyway. And I don't think anybody could identify a single building either here in West Rutland to the town of Castleton. Castleton College is maxing out the town there. I don't think we're gonna find any space in Castleton.
And that's not one of our
So,
towns.
what's that?
And-
And we did want to
right.
stay into town, which was the other thing, but from here, we were looking for a middle spot that everyone from central office can also get out to the schools.
Now,
And-
Lisa, if you want to contact Bill Sweet at Rutland Town offices, he can let you know what's vacant, what they're working with. He's the one that's working with the mall and all the rest of them. he can probably have a pretty good idea
Yeah.
of if there's any, or we can look at.
Reddick has the pulse on everything too, not just
Yep.
Rutland City, so.
Yep, definitely.
I
And just for
I'd be happy to
clarification,
work with them too.
We don't have the ability to purchase a building here at the SU level, or do we?
No,
No, it has to be a school district can
district.
own property, but they could own the property and rent it out to the SU. So
So if we found something to purchase, though, we'd all have to agree on it.
no.
No,
And
one,
that
one
district-
community.
it have to be
One
Quarry
district.
Valley or Rutland Town or
Could be
Well Springs.
several
Yeah, but we could
different-
find a building jointly and all the boards
Be
put
less
in the
than
money on it and
70,000
then
a year
reassess it back out
for
to
a
us.
month.
And I
Yeah,
mean, all the
okay.
boards could really vote in on it to buy something if we really, I mean, I just saw
The
the rent
vote
at
would have to be at
70,000.
each local district.
It would be like a,
It
the
would.
Act
It would be
46.
It would have to
apportioned,
be-
right?
Well, we'd end up
Well-
buying, you know, a 1/3 portion of it.
Or,
Yeah, but
you know,
you would either
district
have to
could
put
take it
the
on at
payment
whole.
in your budget, or you would have to have a special article and they would vote
Right.
on it.
Yes.
But if all three towns put it, it's a special article or four. Actually,
But if you do all three towns, then
Districts,
everybody
I
has
should
to
say.
pass
Everybody has
it.
to pass.
It's like Act
Everybody would have to pay
46.
if we
If
did
they
every
didn't,
district,
if one
then.
votes it down, you're done.
yep.
Or
have to go
one
back
board
out.
can own it.
If you
Right.
could
And
buy a
then-
place for less than $500,000 and you're not paying out $840,000 a year.
I mean, 69,000 will
That's a
pay
lot
your
of money.
bond.
If you had the
Yeah.
place, it
Yeah.
might be worth, I
That's
mean,
the way to
voters
look at it.
might
And
go
there's a
for it.
built-in, isn't there,
And I am aware, by the way,
percentage for the,
The price is right now locked.
oh, okay, because
Or-
it used to have a built-in.
It's locked because we renewed.
That was part of the lease agreement
Part of the
renewal.
deal. Okay.
If we went to 2023,
It used
he
to-
froze the price.
No, but it used to grow
A large
pretty good.
part of the increases that were built into the original lease was because I guess there was a lot of work that was involved
Initially,
with
yeah.
getting the space up to where we needed it. And so
Right.
that cost was built into the lease over
Right.
time with the increases.
Right.
and I was aware of one other building, it would still be in Rutland, I don't, obviously, everybody's feelings about Rutland, but I was aware that the Rutland High School campus that was located at House Center has recently moved to the Opera House under Mr. Foley's umbrella from Giancola, which opened up a huge section of the House Center that was occupied by Rutland High School's alternative program. So that was already wired for the school. I don't know what's there, but anyway, I represent him, so I wouldn't vote on that, but at the end of the day, that's a possibility, and, you know, so, but that's
I
also.
don't think it's big enough.
It's not big enough, so, but anyway, there are spaces, and I'd leave it to the committee to reach out and contact other landlords between here and Pulteney and go
Yeah.
from there, but at least, I mean, it would be nice to at least get a couple options that we
Sure.
could.
I appreciate you bringing the issue up, Lisa, and not letting it slide away.
No, because we're gonna get pinched again, is what's gonna happen in about 2-3 years, and someone's gonna scramble real quick, there's no time for a vote, no time to do anything, so.
I have no idea what
What
it
is
is,
the
but I think there's
Westway?
something
Perfect.
available.
Do we need to vote on that committee, or just do it?
Oh, it's
Just
not
do
right.
it.
All
A
right.
motion.
It's between Sweet
Fantastic.
Carolina.
Committee is formed. Congratulations. Back, any other business anybody wants to put on?
Great for them.
Questions,
Been any problem over
discussions? Hearing none. Lewis, budget.
Is this choice education program, what's that?
Oh, that is in there, that is in the budget.
Okay.
And Christine's not here, so I asked her
Okay.
to put a description in.
Perfect.
So
I
if
just
people
saw
have
it.
questions
Same.
about this alternative program,
Okay.
that's what it is.
Thank you,
Yep.
Judy, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. I was gonna say that when we got to it.
Yeah, we'll go over that during the budget
Yes.
session. So, the budget was in the packet, right? So it's 11 pages long. I do have additional handouts, some that are for executive session, and then I have one that's related to the special ed budget. I'll send it around now, but we'll talk about it in a couple of minutes. So I might jump around a little bit, but I'll refer to pages when I do. So the first page is just a really high overview of the budget. The budget's made up of 3 sections. There's the general fund, which is all of the regular ed piece of central office. So it includes the fiscal services, the superintendent, and technology. Those are the main 3 big pieces, and then rent. The next section is special ed, and that is all of the special educators, the paras, special ed excess cost and tuition. Anything special ed related is in that special ed budget. The special ed budget is a gross amount, the total budget, so we get funding from several different sources for special ed. There's the assessment piece, which is about roughly a third of the budget. Then we have some federal revenue, which is our IDB grant, which is roughly a little under 600,000. And then the largest piece is the state revenue, and that comes in a few different sources. There's the block grant, which is a 60-40 match. That's currently, I believe, 680,000. And then there's the intensive revenue, which is for every dollar that we spend, we get a percentage back in reimbursement. And that's roughly 56.5%. And then there's some other smaller pieces like state-placed revenue, extraordinary revenue. There's a block grant for the Triple-E students. So those are the revenues. So on the top of page 1, all of the revenue sources that I just named, you can see those. Again, this is all totals, and we'll dive into more of the details in a few minutes. And then the expense side is at the bottom of page 1, the 3 sections: general fund, special ed, and bill back.
And is the bill back reduction simply
I'm sorry,
because?
yep. So the bill back, so I didn't explain that one. So the bill back is, it's not related to the central office. It's the regular ed piece of positions that are contracted at the SU, but are building-based positions. And so it could be it's 2 main items. It's the ineligible piece of special ed staff. So if you have special ed staff that are doing regular ed activities such as duties or working with regular ed kids, that portion of their salary is ineligible, and therefore that is billed back. We have estimated 5% for special educators and 15% of paras as an average. So 15% of every para salary and 5% of every special educator salary is going into the bill back section. The other piece of the bill backs is usually grant-funded positions where the person's not funded 100% through the grant. So if we say have an interventionist in West Rutland who's a full-time interventionist, but 50% of their salary is funded through the title grant, then they have an SU contract. 50% of their salary will go into the title grant, and the other 50% of the salary goes into a separate fund and then gets billed back to the district that's using that service. It's not part of the assessment because it's not being utilized evenly across all districts. It's mainly pertains to one district or another, so we bill back those services as a purchase service to whoever's using those services. So there's a few reasons why the bill back expense is down. And we'll go into some of those, but you can, some of them are listed on the summary of changes, which is the next page. And we'll go through each of those sections individually. So the general fund budget, I've listed some of the highlights. I'm not going to go through each of them right now. We'll go through them when we're looking at the budget, each of the budgets. And we'll come back to, we'll reference page 2 in a minute.
Why are the VSBA dues on twice?
That's actually mislabeled. The second one is actually, it's $5,000.
Is that the Superintendent's Association?
The first one is $8,500. That's the VSBA dues. The
That is
last one actually should say added $5,000 for strategic planning. Sorry, that's a mislabel.
And why is there an addition of the VSBA dues?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Why is there an addition? Haven't we been paying the dues all along?
Yeah, so one of the things that we discussed at the last meeting was moving some of those items that are being billed to the SU and then being billed back to the local districts, moving those to the SU and then assessing those services. So right now, we receive a bill and we break that out, and we, each district out of their local budget is paying for a piece of that. So this is saving that step by just building it into the SU budget and assessing it. So it's no cost, it's not a
It's
cost
not an
increase. You're
Just
seeing,
a
it's a
movement.
cost increase for the SU, but it'll be a cost decrease, it's a cost shift for the local district. Same thing with the next line, the 50,000 for curriculum professional services. That's the PD, for PD and in-service costs, as well as Infinite Campus, which is our student management program. So those are things that your local districts are paying now. They're paying them directly as a bill back rather than as an assessment. So it's just a shift. So when we get to your local budgets, I'll point out where those things are coming out of your local budgets and moving to the assessments.
Yeah, because when we look at our local budget, I'm gonna need to know how much you took out, because I don't want it to be artificial. So say 10 grand is ours. I don't want to have you have 10 grand taken out of our budget that you're gonna bill back
Yep.
and not be able to see it. I don't wanna spend it somewhere else.
Yep.
Kind of thing.
So I'll identify those, and I am seeing that the 5,000 for the strategic planning is actually the third item.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, that may just have been an extra line that was added.
Strike the final
So you can
line.
just strike that final line. If something else comes to me while we're going through this, I'll let you know.
When I look at the budget though, and it shows the curriculum professional services, that appears to be a line so that's just being added this year because it was the bill back? And what does that mean?
Which one line are you referring to?
So where you say you added 50,000
Yep.
to curriculum professional services?
Yes.
When I look at the budget, so that's a line that's just been added.
Yep,
What is that encompassing? What does that mean?
So that is professional development that's SU-wide, such as the in-services, so like the opening in-service in August. It's anywhere from the paying somebody to come and do coaching or whatever the PD is for that event, as well as any of the supply and meal costs. I think we provide breakfast, like opening breakfast for that. If we have to rent a location. This year we didn't, but the first year we did. And then we also have an in-service in October, and we have one in March, right? 2 days in March. So those are 3 separate occasions where we get all of the SU together to go over SU-wide initiatives. It's sometimes broken out into different groups, like paras are doing one thing and teachers are doing another, but rather than having to parse out those expenses to the different districts, we'll build it in at the SU and just assess it. And then the main piece is the Infinite Campus, which is our student management program that each of the schools are using.
So that's $60,000 for 1, 2, 4 days for across SU-wide?
10,000 for those.
50,000?
Yes, 10,000.
10,000 for those 4 days.
Well, he said,
The 50,000 is the 40,000 for Infinite Campus plus the 10,000.
Right.
The second line item of the summary of changes,
yeah,
it says added 50K.
that's
And then-
one line.
That's one line, so 10K of that is the PD and in-service, and 40K of it is Infinite Campus.
Okay, thank you. So this is Infinite Campus.
And the Infinite Campus is the student information. That shift is it's being done at the school now. I'm lost in it. I know it's a cost
Yeah,
shift.
sure. Right now, all the schools pay their part of the Infinite Campus fees. He wants to move it to a centralized location so you could just pay one bill and pay it for all the 8 schools.
Well, do you want to say what it's used for?
Yeah, Infinite Campus is more than just where we put our permanent student data. It feeds our grade book, which is Jump Rope. It feeds our assessment database, which is Alpine. It does all the food service processing of the bills back and forth and the credits. It does all food service. It does emergency management, so it's also our emergency management system. So when you get a call that school's out and everything like that, that's coming from Infinite Campus. So it does a lot of roles for that amount of money. Now it's doing all of our state reports. All the front offices are trained to now put the information into Infinite Campus, and we're going to be pushing a button and sending all of our reporting data to the state, where before all the buildings used to pull those reports from everywhere, all over the place, and it was very labor intensive. So yeah, it does a lot.
Thank you.
We'll be coming back to some more of the items and summary of changes when we get to the individual budget sections. So we'll just come back to that in a few minutes. The next page 3, this is what's determining your assessments. So general fund is assessed based on ADM, which is your average daily membership. This is a count of your students that are in your building that's done at the beginning of the school year. It's a 20-day count. So our we have a 1-year lag, so we're using last year's ADM for next year's budget, just because this year's ADM is not available yet. So our current ADM is 1,832 students for 18-19, which is an increase of about 13 students over last year. And so people's percentage of that total can shift from one year to the next based on if their enrollment went up or down. Usually it's pretty minor. I think one of the biggest changes is like 0.2, 0.3%. And then the other side is the special ed assessment, and that's based on child count. So it's the number of IEP students in your town or in your district. And that is also an increase over last year. We had approximately, based on this, it's about 14 students, but we have had additional students move in since the year started, and this snapshot had been taken. This is just a snapshot in time. We're still having a lot of IEP students move in. I think we're up about, Christine mentions that we're up about 20 in her report that went up. It's on this report that I passed around earlier. We're up about 20 IEP students. Any questions on that before we go further? Okay, so now we're going to get into the details of the budgets. So the first one is the general fund budget, and that starts on page 4. It's 2 pages long. So the items that are built into this budget that's causing the increases are listed on the summary of changes, so all of the big ones. So 8,500 in VSBA dues, that is an increase to the SU budget, but it's only a cost shift for local districts, so you'll see that as a shift in your local budgets. The 50K, again, a cost increase, but a shift. The 5,000, this is a new expense. Lisa, maybe perhaps you want to speak to it, but this is something that Lisa asked me to put into the budget for strategic planning for the new superintendent as a professional service.
Yeah, and Judy and I were talking about that, and just making sure that our new superintendent coming into a newly unified district, we have a lot of work to do in terms of continuing our unification process and making sure that we have really clear priorities that all of our districts and all of our schools can get behind. So just putting a little bit of money in the budget for them, for consulting or whatever they think that they might need to help move that work forward, and continue that process of getting us all on the same page in a strategic way.
This budget does not include any changes to the grant writer position, so that position is approximately $60,000. Judy and I have discussed some possible changes, such as removing that position from the budget and looking at doing any grant writing position at a contracted service based on a percentage of whatever they bring in as revenue, so some percentage of whatever grant that they get. Judy, do you want to speak to that more now?
Actually, Corinne and I spoke very briefly about it. We haven't had a chance to really sit down, but she had some ideas and I had some ideas, and it might be, since we haven't had really good applicants, we have some that we need to interview, but it might be a cost-saving measure, but still get us some grant writing, a grant writing person. Many places do it where it's just a percentage of what they bring in. It's, kind of like a grant management fee type of thing. And you can put it at, like 5% of your grant or whatever. But Corinne's more well-versed than I am. We just touched on it. So that's kind of hanging out there, and I need to sit down with her probably before November 5th.
Well, you're authorized, and,
Yeah,
my
I
thought
know,
is on
I know.
that position is, what we had came up with the last meeting, is actually 2 meetings ago, was put it out for hire on someplace other than School Spring. Because if
Yep.
you were a grant writer, you weren't gonna be looking
Yeah.
on School Spring.
We have
that
had
would be
a couple of
educational, so-
applications,
That have come in,
Yeah.
so. and
just
that's-
recently,
But
believe it or
that's
not.
on a, did we ever post on a different median? We had talked
We
about like
did.
possibly Monster or something
I
like that.
think we did
but-
indeed.
Okay, all right, cool. Because that would be good. It makes sense to keep it there. I mean, we can't fill it, but I think it's so unique. And if it ends up working out, I can see other districts around the state picking this up. But if we can get a grant writer in that's taking some of the burden off the staff from some of the grant writing, or to help out, and in addition to that, go out and look for money for our district to have someone on staff for 50, 60,000. I still think it's a great position, and it's something we shouldn't just cut. I think it's something we should leave out there. And if I'm not mistaken, we used some of those money went to tech this year that were unused. If I'm not mistaken, we came up with some money for Greg, through that money that was there. But anyway, I think it's a very important position, but it was the one that I sponsored here. So I just hope that we keep trying to fill it, at least try it one more year and see what we get. Well, it'll be good.
Okay. The next one is added 2 technicians at roughly $65,000 each. So it's a total of $130,000. That's salary and benefits. The salary increases built in, and we can talk about that more in executive session. And then health insurance premiums are increasing 12.9%.
So glad the state got involved to save us money.
Roughly $22,000 for just the general fund portion. And I did remember what that last item was. It's under building operations, it's $5,000 for security upgrades.
That's correct.
And on the insurance, if I'm not mistaken, this is also going to apply to us on the local level, so we'll be discussing this in a month. Is that correct, Louis? This is going to apply to all of our health insurance plans?
Yeah.
So it's across, but if I'm not mistaken, it was 11% last year.
It was
So
11%
last
I
year
think it
and
was
then 12 this year?
11.8% last year, and then it's 12.9 starting in July, and then the state's taking it over. We won't have
How they
those,
can get away with this? I really don't. I mean,
we,
that's
we won't have those details until
23%
December.
in 2 years. The health insurance has gone up. And we have no leeway in this, right? We have no leverage? I can just be upset over here, but it's
No, there's nothing we can do.
You can still
the
vamp.
wrong business. I would like to bill someone for an extra amount of money and tell them there's nothing you can do.
Nothing you can do about it, just pay it.
Just pay it.
How
It's
would
it's
you-
unbelievable. It really is unbelievable. When the COLA is under 3%, for this to keep going, it's insanity. I have a feeling you're gonna show up next year with another 10, 11, 12%. It's just nuts.
Well, built into the following year will be whatever the state decides with this negotiations that they're doing right now.
And we should
So
know
is
that
everybody
in
aware of what's happening with
January.
insurance? Do you want me to talk about that for a minute?
Go ahead.
So, it was decided by the legislators that insurance, we're going to be taken off the bargaining table and be done SU-wide, or statewide. So there's currently bargaining that's happening between the NEA or the union representatives. I think there's also other members other than the NEA, as well as, so that's one side, and then the other side is board members and the VSBA, who are bargaining a statewide health insurance plan. And so they're looking at all aspects of plans, HRAs, and they have been negotiating this for, since last year. They had to have a report by August 1st, I believe it was. And so right now they're in arbitration, and there was no agreement, so they're in arbitration, and they have to have a final settlement to us by December 15th as to what the plan will look like.
Oh, they said November 15th was the day they would know what the arbitration,
Their decision?
yeah. That was
I'm
in an
not sure, I
email.
had 12/15 written down, so.
Well,
I
12/15
can-
is the final,
It's the
but,
final, but they would release it.
yeah.
The arbitration on November 15th,
Yeah.
okay.
And the arbitration, to be clear, I think is not like a compromise. It's up or down one side or the other. It's not.
Yeah, either
it's not a
one side
middle
will get
ground.
it.
It's
or the
binding,
other.
and it's binding
And it's
arbitration.
binding. So it's
Awesome.
high stakes.
So I'd like to take questions now on the general fund and have a discussion about that before we move on to special ed, and then we'll take special ed as a separate piece.
So the strategic planning for professional services, which line is that? Is
That is
the
under, so if
executive?
you're on page 4, it's
Yeah.
under executive administration.
Yep,
If you look at the professional service line, which is about halfway down that section.
Yep.
The budget went from 1,000 to 6,000.
yep. Just wanted to make sure I had the right line. So there's another, is it on the next page?
There's a professional services on the plan operations, and that's the security, the 5,000.
Is the professional services under curriculum, the 50,000 shift?
That's the piece for the PD, in-service, and Infinite Campus.
Communications, because we had gone from 15 to 7, now we're back up to 15 again. It's on page, where are we, 5? I'm just wondering why like this.
It's,
It just says
under
communications.
technology, communications.
Okay, that's, so that's on the technology, that our actual was 15,000, so we were misbudgeted for last year, so we'll be overspent this year as well. And I don't know, maybe Greg could help answer that. So that's our internet and phones for just central office, is that because of the adding the space? Do you know why we're so under on that, or so over?
Well, where's that?
Under technology, communications, we
technology.
spent
Page
15
5.
last year.
Page 5 up from the
Out in the
bottom.
middle.
In technology.
You're on page 4?
I am.
Page
5, I
five.
mean, 5.
While he's looking at that, do you wanna, anybody else have any questions?
Workers' comp increase? Was there an experience rating change, or is this?
Yeah,
Maybe
so
even time.
workman's comp is based on experience. We have currently a few outstanding issues,
Okay.
and they continue to come in. So it is based on, the rates have pretty much, the base rates through Visbit have stayed constant. It's based on experience, as well as it's based on our increase in payroll. So our payroll has increased over the last few years with grant-funded positions, special ed positions, regular ed positions. So as our payroll goes up, our workman's comp goes up.
And what about travel under executive and curriculum? It's up $3,000 under curriculum and,
Is that paying-
So the travel under executive administration, we are budgeting 10. Deborah spent 11, almost 12,000 last year. Deborah visited every school every week.
right,
So there was a
what
lot
are
of
we do-
mileage and a lot
Are
of
we doing some different things with our, since we have such technology? I mean, it seems like when you look at the warrants, that mileage reimbursement is incredibly high.
Lisa, can you talk, or Judy? I know
We
you're,
were just talking about this at a
Yes,
Bob
we were.
meeting the other day also, and like, can't we just do stipends? Do we have to
Yeah.
do forms? But apparently there are some specific requirements that we have to meet that won't just allow us to do stipends. If you know more about that than I do.
it would have to be wages, but as far as this line is concerned, I mean, I know the model last year was with Deborah visited every school, and so did Adam visit
Yeah,
every
this
school
year,
every week, so I'm not
Lisa's
sure what's
doing-
happening now.
Because I'm part-time, Lisa does the majority of the school visits. And I just go when I need to attend a meeting or something. And then I do a visit while I'm there, you know. But I suspect for this year, that line will be down for the executive piece. But it's really what your new superintendent's going to be doing next year.
And what the purposes of the visits are, I mean, most of my meetings with the coaches are, with the principals are really primarily of a coaching slant, where I'm working with them through a problem, we're going and doing an observation together, and then talking about the write-up and the feedback that would be done with the teacher, or talking them through how they would give that feedback to the teacher. So those are things that don't necessarily lend themselves very well to technology, but there are ways that we can take advantage of it. There's a planning meeting the other day for professional learning communities at one school, and I just joined them by, Google Meet instead of driving down to the school and back, because I didn't need to be face-to-face. It wasn't a relational kind of interaction. It was just a meeting. So, yep, a mixture of both. But, us being available and out in the schools is really important in making sure that we're a presence and are knowledgeable about what's happening in buildings. Some of you I know visit schools quite often, and you can walk in the door and feel what's happening in a building very quickly. You don't get that same sense if you're not present, boots on the ground, walking through hallways with principals, hearing what schools sound like when you walk in the doors.
And just to, get back to that communications piece, we did have 4 schools come online with both internet and phone, but I thought that would be an expense at the local level. So I think I have to sit down with Louis and figure out why the communications line. I mean, there's constant bandwidth increases built into budget increases in the communication lines, both at central office and at the school level. As we have more demands, we raise the bandwidth, but I'm not sure, actually. We have to look at what's being billed to that line to see why the communication needs to be bumped up, and I'm sure he's bumping it up for a reason.
I'm bumping it up based on the actual, so we'll look into the
Right. Yeah, we'll have
actuals
to
and
look
see what's
into that.
happening.
But I'm not aware of anything that would have bumped it up just on its own at the central office.
Okay.
You didn't move any local communication expense into
This should just be
office.
SU based.
Yeah, so I have to.
So we'll have that
just- I
updated
have
for
to
next
do-
week then, and,
Yeah, I'll just do a
or next
report.
month.
For next month, yeah.
Yep.
Well, I could also mail it, should I? No.
We'll just take it
I
up next
think
month when the
next month.
actual budget
No,
comes
it's
out, and
okay.
you guys will have more
Okay.
information. This is just a draft, and it's to get everybody on the same page, so. All right, thank you. Any other questions we had on the general stuff? I do have a question at the end, but I want to look at the end bottom of page 5 and just discuss it generally. But anyway, questions that anybody has on specific line items?
The only other question is, what is the $5,000 additional security upgrade then that you're looking to do?
What is it?
We haven't identified exactly what we're gonna do yet, but we know right now, as we talked about earlier, that the upstairs is locked down pretty tight, but people can still come into the building and get into the stairwell, so there was discussions last week about working with the adult learning to see if we can keep the outside external doors locked and have a buzzer system to let people into the building. We're not sure how and if that would work, so it's something that we're still discussing, but we wanted to build some money in there just in case we come up with a plan that
I would
works.
think that would be the landlord's
Yeah, I was gonna say,
responsibility, that's not ours.
would we be paying for adult learning?
Well, no, we would want to split the cost.
But that should be the landlord. He should have a system on there that,
I'll put it on the list.
I hate to say it, but it sounds like we already have enough issues with the
Doesn't matter.
landlord to throw in
I
a security
mean-
that he's gonna say no to, and if they don't feel safe
but you
for
have to bring it
5,000,
up
that's-
anyways, Matt, only because you're turning around saying our building is falling apart, you're not doing what we want to do. Now we've got all this additional security stuff we're doing, paying more and more and more.
Yeah, I think that's,
So
the
it's very
security
important.
money already spent should be included in this
Right.
letter. Because
agreed.
nobody's gonna take those cameras down when they move.
That's a good
Never
point.
know.
Yeah, we could,
We should,
never know.
but anyways, yeah.
Good.
but I think you're going to be there for a while, you know.
Royals could just move it. Royals, yeah,
Yes.
we would probably actually move it to our
Really?
new location.
Sure.
Because we have a DVR in the server room, that keeps all the footage and archives all the camera footage. Like, that's definitely in our contract with Royals, not the building.
I'll make sure that we know now that you've got cameras there, thank you.
Well, just to let me note real
Say
quick
hi.
that, the bathrooms downstairs are open to the public. And coming and going from the building, I do know that those bathrooms and that general area sometimes is used by people who
And it
are not
shouldn't
part
be.
of us
Right.
and are not part of the
Right.
adult learning.
Right.
So people very quickly in the community find out which
Oh, yeah.
bathrooms can be open and which ones are available, and people do use it that should not be using
Mm-hmm.
it. So that's where that comes from, and that is a safety issue.
That is. I'll agree with that.
Any other line items, questions, discussion on?
Are the 2 technicians for IT sufficient? Have you thought about if you didn't need a data analyst, or if 2 technicians would be enough for you? I'm just curious about,
Right. When I look at the tickets, mostly, a lot of them are on the technician level. Although, Milt, our systems administrator, his responsibility is mainly high-level networking problems, Infinite Campus and Jump Rope. And those systems have had an enormous uptick in labor related to them. And so when he's out of the loop, then we all have to scramble with networking problems. And it's just basic bottlenecking of our labor. I put those in there knowing that the person that arrives is gonna have a skill set that might not, will fit not neatly into you're a technician. They might be, they might be a teacher that has a tech integration certification. They might be a data analyst or Milt. They might be a programmer generalist like me. We don't know what we're gonna get, but, it might turn out to be a higher paid one person and then a lower paid other person. But when looking at the tickets, they mostly Infinite Campus, fixing things, and jump rope. Really, that's where the main area where we're getting bottlenecked, mostly with repairs.
And if I'm not mistaken, on tech side, Bennington, the supervisory union down there, their tech department is twice our size. They're a very similar sized district, but their tech department is almost three
They
times
have
what your
nine-
department
They
is.
have 9 buildings. They have 12 people in their tech department, 3 MILTs, 3 systems administrators. I think actually 5 now. And then all the rest technicians.
Yep.
They usually have a technician per building, sometimes 2.
So I think we've been running late. It's put too much pressure on you between adding Pulteney on there. I'm aware of issues with either testing or even just simply rolling out passwords and people getting into testing and having programs and, having difficulties getting things off the ground. So I think this is gonna go a long way in figuring out where we are in the next year. We're short compared to what another district our size is using, so you've had to make do, and anyway, I fully support that. I'm not sure how everybody else feels, but I can't keep hearing the issues on tickets and whatnot related to tech
Yeah,
and
and
not think it's due to our small size.
Thank you, Matt. It really is annoying when you know that you just have to tell somebody, we can't get to your ticket, because I have to prioritize things.
Yep.
And then
they
somebody
don't
who
understand.
might have a very simple problem has to wait several days to get it. It's really, and it reflects badly on us, but it really is not, it really is not a problem with any of the decisions that we're making. It really is just a first in, first out. It's just a queue, and it's just basic math. And, in the past, I've come and showed help desk ticket statistics, and I could do that again. And you'll see when there's some days then there's 90 tickets in the system. You just have to pick the highest one and try to figure out, okay, I'm going to work on this, and it might be 10 minutes, it might be an hour, it might be the whole day. And it will go a long way, yes.
I would also just add to that we spoke about the increase in, recommended increase in technicians in the budget with both the coaches and the principals.
Everybody
And
agreed.
Both groups were very supportive of increasing our staff, our tech staff, in whatever way we can manage and realizing that there's an impact on students and teachers every day, because so much of what we do is now technology-based, driven, or integrated, that, it's not just, your printer is not printing. Many of these things affect teaching and learning and the work that we're trying to do in our classrooms every day. So there was a large amount of support for an increase in this area.
Yeah, I think tech and special ed is where I hear the complaints. So you can start to get an idea as a board member through meeting with administrators and everyone else as to where the issues are, and it's come up as tech and special ed all the time, so. Any other discussion on that, or any other line item questions?
Lisa mentioned the website earlier. Where are we on website functionality?
Shannon has been plugging along, doing web-based tickets. 2 days ago, she did the staffing list for Pulteney. She went around taking images of all the staff, and so they can have little bios and stuff like that. She's working on the first draft of all of the website changes. We purchased a new template. She's been programming it, and that we have a whole version for all the school websites, and we have a version for the GRCSU website, and she is building it now. She's been a very good fit. She has been knocking out any tickets related to web. She's been meeting with the administrators, any teachers that have anything web-related, working on their websites. I feel like it's working out really well.
How long do you expect for her to have that task?
Well, it's
to
really
build it
in
up?
just all the feedback that she's getting from the buildings. Her task list is pretty big at this point. Like, I want this, I think this should be there, and we just talked through some of those tasks just recently at the first admin meeting of all the feedback, because she went out all throughout all of the schools, gaining feedback from administrators, from the staff, and so I would say you will see a dramatic website change I think the first test school will likely be Pulteney, just because she's happened to be working on their staff list now and some of the graphics related to that now. I would say in maybe a month, you could start seeing, whoa, this is a different website.
It's great, thanks.
Any other line item discussions?
Just one, Louis, the retirement, it almost doubled.
Section, are you in
I'm
technology?
sorry, yes.
Technology.
Yes.
That is due to the new positions, as well as there was some increases in positions last. So that's a percentage of salaries. So it was based on increases to salaries as well as the two new
That's two
positions.
tech people, one web,
We paying you too much?
there's three.
Compared to what?
The majority of that is Beamers, which is 4.25%.
He knows better, he's gotta tell me the truth.
Any other
Okay,
line item
thank you.
questions? So my question for you is down on the bottom of page 5, which is the overall assessments, and maybe I missed it, I was out of the a couple of minutes, but the last year, if I'm not mistaken, we had switched how we were doing, the assessments and the billing, and if I'm not mistaken, Rutland Town was about 65,000. I had to go back to the voters and say, this is what we went up. This year, I'm looking at the variance going back to Rutland Town of $72,000. Is that just merely the health insurance, wages, and other, and I'm looking
everything
across
we-
the budget, but what do I go back when they say, okay, you were up 65 last year, now you're up 72 this year, what's going on? What's my response to that? and
It's everything
everybody
we
else at the
just
table?
talked. So a portion of it, let's say,
So there was no accounting change,
no, it's
can't
all
keep-
the increases. So the budget's up by 292,000, the assessment. So that's all increases in assessment. So that's about, I think it was 60,000 of that is shifts. So you should see a portion of that in each of your local budgets says coming out of other lines and moving to the assessment. But the rest of it is increases. So the 130 for the new positions. There's the increases in salary. There's the increases in premiums. So there are increases that are going to have to be borne by the districts in the assessment.
Is this something I could pretty much expect every year now? Last year was 65, now I'm looking at 72 for an increase, and
That's completely up to the SU board and what you approve.
I think the 72, you could, probably Rutland Town is looking at about $15,000 less
so I
out
needed
of
to,
that 60,000, 27% of 60,000.
There's a portion that we're not going to be able to help each year. We know health insurance is going to go up each year. Salaries go up each year, inflationary cost. There's going to be a set percentage unless we actually make cuts. You're going to see a small percentage increase. But so this year you have all of that stuff, plus we're adding on other pieces. So we're adding those two tech positions and we're adding a few other smaller things.
can I go back to page 1 real quick, and it's just a simple issue that I'm just having trouble understanding, which is, again, the overall picture. If I look at FY '20 budget at total revenue, I'm at 8679, FY '21 is 887. How do I end up with the difference of 523,000? And then I'm looking at the same thing down below, total expense, total from one budget to the next, and I'm looking at a variance of 523, but I'm only seeing a change of about 50,000? 60,000? Why is it 523,000 is the variance when it, am I missing something?
You're not missing it.
I don't understand that.
Let me take a look.
I just didn't understand. It looks like the budget really went from 8.6, or the total revenue went from 8679 to 87, and the variance is 523,000, and then same thing down below too. The total expense went from 8679 to 8734, and the variance is 523, and I'm missing something, but I just don't understand what it is. And the reason I ask that is, if I'm not mistaken, our increases, percentage-wise, is that 523 number. We're all being asked to make up that number, which is the 523. Rutland Town, 72, Ira's in at 10.
So that is, that expense line is an error in the formula. So our expenses actually for FY '20 are 8.8 million. 8824 72922. And the FY '21 is $9,348,133.45.
Oh, so these numbers are different then?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the net, the difference is correct, it was just the totals there.
And so if I'm not mistaken, just back to page 5 then, so the differences that we gotta make up doesn't quite come out to the, I mean, that's what's bizarre to me, is that our variance on page 1 is 523, but my variance on page 5 is 292, 354.
Because that's just one piece. We have two other pieces that we haven't discussed yet. So the general fund is the first
Haven't
piece.
gotten to special ed.
Okay, and so the difference is then special ed.
Special ed and bill backs. So special ed is also up, but bill backs are down.
Okay, so, but we have to adjust this, so page 1 is wrong then, what we were looking
Right.
at?
Yes.
Okay.
So if everyone's good with all of that, I'll move on to special ed.
But anyway, at the end of the day, that 523 number is correct, 523,404, that's the variance,
Yeah.
that's the amount of increase that we have. Last question for you before we move on to special ed, was there anything you guys discussed cutting, is there anything we're missing? Anything, I mean, I'm not seeing anything
Is this
here,
the night
line
that you
item.
have to make decisions?
What's that?
Is this the night that we have?
No,
to
this is
make
just a
decisions?
draft and
Next month is-
discussion, but
Next,
I mean, I look at most of the things we can't touch, I can't change that 12% for the health insurance increase, I
I
can't.
just need to look at it. I'm not gonna be here probably, so it doesn't matter. Just overlook me.
Oh, shoot,
so
we'll email it to you.
anything that you want included in the next round, you need to either let me know now or sometime between the next meeting. But still at the next meeting, we can make cuts on the fly and. just
No, but I'm
reduce the
asking
budget.
you, if you guys had a discussion about anything that you could cut.
We
if
talked
there's
about
anything superfluous.
shifting the grant writer to a different, rather than just salary and benefits, shifting that to a percentage base and reducing that. Because a lot of, some grants that they write and apply for, there'll be a piece in there that you can take out for indirect costs or administrative costs, so we can pay them right out of the grant. For those grants that you can't do that with, we could have some money in professional services. And if no grants get written, then we have no expense.
But we've each paid the assessment for the grant writer.
I'm sorry, what's that?
But we've each paid the grant writer's fee through our assessment. Personally, I think we need to reassess the grant writer. We can't carry another $60,000. If we're gonna hire 2 technicians, which we need, which are live bodies, to carry that position for another year on a whim, I think is asking a lot. When I look at what our assessment is going up, I don't think it's fiscally responsible. I think if you want to try to do it at a percentage and try the consultant, but just to continually say there must be somebody out there, they're gonna come along, you're asking us to, that's a good chunk of change that we're being assessed
No, I agree, but it's also
against.
being rolled back in. And it's either gonna be rolled back in as a surplus, or it's gonna be
Or-
rediverted to tax,
or-
which we did, and.
Or we look at it and say, yeah, it's like a savings plan, and you say you're not using it, so we're gonna use it for something else, which is slightly disingenuous.
I'll leave it to you guys, and, my thought is, though,
I'm
is
just
to try
thinking
one
when
more
you
year,
look
and
at-
then after that, we scrap it and say, forget about a grant writer position, I guess we won't try something new,
When you
but
look at the
that's all I'm
increase, it's
asking.
$500,000. So you're talking 60,000. I understand that a grant writer, a good grant writer, will more than pay for themselves. But just to hold on to it,
Agree with you.
it could be a month from the end of next year before you find one. So they're not gonna get any revenue in.
Yep.
Well, during our,
At which time, though, we have the money that just goes back into a surplus, so I don't see it as, while
If it
it's
does,
sitting
but
here
it always
unused.
seems like it gets used if it's in there.
Yeah,
Yep.
It just like when Greg came last time, it's like, oh, we have this little savings plan over here called Grant Writer,
Yeah, I like that.
and we're gonna take $10,000.
That's exactly what we did too.
Yeah.
The,
So, yeah, I,
question for you, Louis, did we have a
Not a fan
surplus
of
this
that.
year, deficit, when the numbers, when are we gonna know that? Do we have any idea?
I reported that in August. We had a surplus of 21,000.
So that was it. So out of an $8 million budget, $8.5
Well,
million
so
budget, we had about, we cut
that
it
was
that
just the
close to
general, that was
21,000?
just the general fund.
Just
So
on the
special
general
ed,
side.
we end at 0. So we did a final assessment. It was actually a refund that was given back to the districts that offset some of the bill backs.
So we came in that close, because we always try to build a little bit of fluff in there, right? You try to be on the
we
side of
do not
surplus.
build in fluff. I want that on camera now, because you just shot everybody right in the foot.
No, I agree, but no,
But you didn't
when you're
even have a
budgeting in the
surplus of
budgeting
the
office,
grant
you
writer.
can't budget for 0 in a school district. You can't budget to be perfectly at 0. So the budget
you try
office
to
is
get as
trying to
close
be
as
on
you
the
can.
surplus side versus being on the deficit
Deficit
side.
So-
Right.
When we
Right,
try to
but
do it,
you're-
so I use the word fluff for surplus, so
Can't
let's,
use fluff
we're gonna,
and-
we're gonna
no.
switch that word to
We have no
surplus.
contingency, no fluff built into the budget. And the grant writer position was not in last year's budget. So that was not something
It's
that
in
we had
this one for
savings
the
for.
first one.
This is the first year that
Okay.
the
Right.
position's been in.
Yep.
No slush
And
funds,
that's being,
no fluff, no
that's being
nothing.
offset with the severance payment.
But you guys cut it that close, so we ended up at 21,000 on it, you know, and over an $8.5 million budget.
Well, most of the expenses don't change, their salaries, and central office staff has been a lot more steady than school staff. I mean, a lot of us have been there for a long time.
That's true. And we got the bigger swings on the local budgets with people
Right.
not staying within
A
the
lot of
district,
turnover.
people going to private school, leaving, and, okay.
I mean, it's still excellent when you come in that close. Well, you always hope you have a huge surplus. It very seldom, especially on this budget. But I'm just saying, when you're looking at $500,000, 60,000 at least brings it down underneath there a little bit.
Yep.
And when we don't have true plans, I mean, if we had somebody on the horizon, maybe.
Yep.
But we got all we can do to get a superintendent.
Mm-hmm.
Judy's gonna have to hang around for about 10 more years.
Yep. Judy doesn't mind.
She's too old.
We like this operational style with Judy. It
Yes.
works well.
It does. The, so we have, any other questions, general budget items before we move to special ed? Anything else from anybody? Ooh, a special ed.
Okay. So the special ed budget is quite a bit longer. It's about 4 pages long. Starts on page 6. As I talked about earlier, there's several methods that special ed is funded through. There's the assessment, which is about a third of it. There's the state revenue, which is a little bit more than, it's probably about another 40 or 50%. And then there's the grant piece. So last year, we changed it, the way we budgeted, we included all of the expenses in the budget as a gross expense, and then we deducted all of the state revenue, the federal revenue to come up with a net assessment. When we do look at the actuals for the grant piece is not included here, either is the revenue. So the revenue and the expense are both missing, they net each other out. So you're left with just the piece that's assessed and state revenue. So the changes to the special ed, as you all know, special ed's based on student needs, and their student population has been increasing for special ed. So on the summary of changes on page 2, I have some of the highlights listed.
Page what?
Page 2, in the
Oh,
middle,
I'm sorry,
the
yes.
middle
I've got to go back,
section.
yep.
So there's no special ed K through 12 staff increases that are included over the FY20 actuals. There are changes in the FY20 actuals that have occurred over our FY20 budget. And so if you go to that other sheet of paper that I handed out at the beginning, on one side is Christine Camps, who's the Director of Special Ed Student Support Services, is her highlights, those in her words. On the other side is a staffing comparison that I put together for all of the buildings for paras and teachers, as well as a roll-up. So for looking at special ed teachers, we budgeted 24. We actually have 25 now, so one extra special ed educator was approved. And so FY21 budget is flat over the actual, but it is an increase over FY20's budget. Pre-K teacher, we shifted the model, we talked about this at the end of last year, where rather than each of your preschool teachers in your schools doing the case management and the IEP services for your preschool teachers, we moved them all to regular ed so they can just concentrate on classroom instruction. And we hired a pre-K case manager who's working with all of the students in the SU, pre-K IEP students, to do their case management and IEP services. We hired one person for this year, and we're looking at increasing that to 2 positions for next year, one for the northern schools, one for the southern schools, so that there's less time spent traveling and we can concentrate more on services. Paraeducators, this includes special ed, it's majority special ed, like 98%, 99%, and then there's 2 pre-K one-on-one paras built into this. We budgeted for 50, our actuals for this year are 54. Our budget for next year is also 54. And so on the list. Evaluators are constant, behavioralists stayed constant, psychologists stayed constant, tutors, that was a new position. That was added, I believe it was at the August meeting it was approved. They were a special ed teacher, and we moved that to a tutoring position for special ed students. And that's continuing for next year. And then no change to counselors. And then there's staffing in the special ed budget built in for an alternative program. And we can discuss that in just a minute. Let's just go through some of the other highlights. So there's 5 positions built into that alternative program, and we'll come back to that in a second.
Those are all new?
Those are all new, yep. Skipping, still on the summary of changes, some of these things I've already covered. Another change that I think Christine had mentioned at a previous meeting was the state is directing us that for every special education student that attends a special ed program, there has to be a portion of that that needs to go to local regular ed tuition. And so, and that is a state directive that's starting for next year. So if we have a student that's, say, going to VAC and the tuition is $50,000 and it's a special ed program, they're saying that we have to take a portion of that and put it to regular ed tuition because a portion of that pertains to regular ed. So I think we're using 20% in our estimates of that cost. It's roughly $110,000 for the full issue. And again, this is a state directive.
No, I know, it's just that when, if you remember, one of the big arguments when we went for 46 is we're gonna put them all together so that we can share the resources, and then you look at this and everything is just exploded as far as what we're adding, so we're not really consolidating and saving anything, we're spending a lot more. So that's my confusion when they come to me and ask.
Well, that's what the pessimist said when this whole thing was enacted. Like,
Yeah, I
you
know.
really think you're gonna be saving money, you're doing all this restructuring,
But we've
you're doing
never
all this
saved-
work,
Rutland
what are
Town
you
has
gonna do,
never
save money
saved
on
money.
toilet paper?
Never saved
All you're doing
money.
is consolidating, so the only savings were gonna come from the extinguishment of maybe, central office jobs.
Right,
That's
and
where
that
the
never
only
happened.
savings would come. There was actually maybe some in this
Not in the
district, I don't
town.
know how it happened, but between the Polteny office being closed
But now
up,
I'm saying, I'm just
that's the only
looking
way.
at special ed itself.
Nothing
I mean,
else
we were
stopped.
hoping to be able to share
Well, that
resources.
Well, special ed staff, I mean, I totally agree with you. Special ed staff has never been stable. It's all based on IEPs, and it seems like the population is getting more and more needier and different, and the needs are becoming more complicated, which is resulting in, we're shifting now from paras to behavioralists, and
What's the difference on just salary between the two? You don't have to get into explaining their jobs, but it's saying now that we have to have a,
you can probably, 2 paras are equivalent to 1 para as far as benefits and salary.
Behaviors.
I'm sorry, 2 paras equals 1 behavioralist.
okay. And, okay, I'll save the other for executive session.
But is this
I won't say
conversation,
anything on camera.
this conversation to me feels like we're saying that all of this is a cost increase and that we're not improving student outcomes at all.
I didn't
You
hear
find
that
that
at
to
all.
be the case?
Did anybody hear that? I didn't hear that.
I mean,
Can
Kimberly
we
maybe.
clarify, though? I mean, I just,
No, we just talked,
I mean,
I
I'm
think it
not
was
saying
about the Act
specific.
46 consolidation.
I can't
was
speak
supposed
to
say
student
it.
outcomes, that's
No.
not my.
And that's not what I meant at all by my comment.
I know, I think that you have to it is more challenging. I'm not discounting that. It is more expensive. I'm not discounting that. But we are seeing improvements in a hard way to measure. I mean, I'm a layman. I can't provide that. That's why I'm asking.
No, I just thought it was
Is there-
irrelevant, because we're talking about Act 46, consolidation was supposed to save everybody money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all we're not talking about student outcomes. Act 46, I don't think had anything to do with student outcomes. It was about.
No, we were just hoping
more
to be able to
centralizing.
work into saving by getting all
In
together.
consolidating and-
And special ed was another, because there's so many specific areas.
Oh, yeah, we were gonna be floating teachers from one district, or special
So, I
educators
mean-
from one district to another to meet the needs, and I don't think to date anybody has shifted
I mean,
from one
this just
school
was
to
just a
another.
surprise to me.
There is a vision of increasing equity for students.
Right.
I think there's a couple, I'm sorry, I'm Kimberly Sedman, the Assistant Director of Student Service. I'm sort of new to the table here. But if I can just speak to a couple of the things, the district management group in the University of Vermont sort of sent down a report, in conjunction with the state, talking about providing a higher level of service. So more special educator service, less para-educator service in terms of direct instruction, more instruction from a behavioral interventionist rather than a para-educator, sort of an entry-level position, to try to get ahead of some of these things. So that's a piece of the cost we're looking at. But the other piece is, and you all know this, the landscape is just changing. And the number of move-ins, it's dramatic. It's, 3 this week, honestly, that I'm aware of with significant needs. And when a kid moves in and we have to adjust staffing, it's a moving target. It's a constant moving target. So when we're looking at the numbers of, maybe 14 for child count, and Christine saying 20, that was last week. So we're trying to make adjustments on the fly, and we are looking at, trying to increase outcomes for students and make meaningful changes. So I understand that in conjunction with Act 46, you can't say there's cost savings, but we really are trying to achieve, better outcomes for the students.
But I mean, in the budget, I'm just trying to wrap my head around it, and I apologize. Like, you want a behavioralist. But then down here, it said some of the paras are replaced by a behavioralist. So, say Rutland Town itself, we're going up 7 paras. But it might not be. What you're saying is it could be 5 paras and 2 behavioralists?
No, so
Okay.
this is actual staffing, so we only have one behavioralist that's on our payroll right now, and they're at Proctor Elementary School. They're a half-time through special ed, half-time through regular ed.
Okay.
We do also contract with Rutland Mental Health for behavioralists, as well as some counseling services, I believe. So some schools may also have behavioralists that as a contracted service. I added this footnote because Pulteney Elementary did drop from 10 paras to 5 paras last year, but that was offset because there was 2 behavioralists that were added as a contracted service to offset that loss in staff.
Okay.
The increase in Rutland Town paras, that is an actual number, and we talked about it at Rutland Town. That's one of the reasons Rutland Town budget is
Right.
in bad shape this year. Just due to the needs at the school, with new students moving in, there was a need for extra paras.
Yeah, like I said, we can't get into specifics on that, so it's no big deal.
Yeah, we could talk
Any
more
other
in
questions,
executive
special
session.
ed side?
Are you guiding us through any more of the special ed
So,
budget?
yep, so we can talk a little bit about the alternative program. I think Christine talked about it a little bit in previous meetings. So we're looking at creating our own program in a space to be determined. I think she's looking right now for a space in one of the towns. And this would be for middle and high school students as an alternative placement to placing them at another private school. So we will see a cost increase in staffing, and that's going to be offset with a reduction in excess cost and tuition cost. For this year, we're not estimating that to be a savings, just because it's a new program, it's going to need to be built. We're being conservative with the number of students that we're going to have in our first year. But Christine believes as we move forward, that we can increase this number of students, and not only it being a cost savings, but also be a place that we can place students within our own districts and have more control over it and have another option, because I believe the options have been scarce lately for middle to high school placements. Kimberly, you want to jump in at all?
Yeah, that's absolutely the case, that when we have a student who's not been successful in a traditional middle or high school setting, we're very restricted by the options for placement. Not only are they exorbitant in cost, but they're just few in number. There's a scarcity. And we've contacted neighboring districts, really, to say, would you have a placement for this student who's struggling to thrive in their home school? And neighboring districts such as Rutland City are not able to accept us tuitioning students even at this point. So there is really a need. The Achievement Center doesn't have a high school program, and as I just said, Rutland City doesn't have openings right now, so we're really sort of backed into a corner when we look at educating our students who are struggling.
How can they not take them?
They're not their students, so Rutland City.
So they can take all of our just high efficiency students, but they won't take any of the special ed.
Well, these programs have specific capacity in staffing, and so they're saying that they're at
Okay,
capacity.
so Rutland Town can say, well, we can't take all 12. We don't have the money for all of them, so you'll have to find someplace else for you. Instead of us hiring an additional 7 paras, we can say, no, we don't have the room.
It's a responsibility of your
Of our
district.
Well, I
to
know,
live
but
in
how
your
is
town,
the high school not?
because you don't have a high school.
Yeah.
Right, so they have choice.
So is Lehigh not an option? Are they full or?
Oh, that program in specific works for some students. It doesn't work for all students, and sort of they're changing their target group of students as well. Again, it's really fluid. You know, if you build a program specifically around emotional disturbance, and then you have kids that don't quite fit that profile, we have to look again for another placement, which is why the program that Christine's proposing, we're sort of building it in flight, and it can be fluid and adaptive to the needs of kids within our district. So it's not being labeled as, you know, a certain kind of program. It's a program that's for, I mean, a certain student profile.
Yeah, no, I
It's really more adaptable to what students within our district need.
Now, is that also paid for by the districts with those students that are attending there?
Unless you want to talk to the financial side.
Yeah. I'm
The
sorry.
gen ed
What was it?
piece, the gen ed piece.
So that we will, so not included in this is the cost of the rent and building maintenance. That would probably be about another 40,000. That has not been built into the budget yet because we're still looking to get guidance as to whether that could be a special ed expense or a local expense.
But just on the cost savings side, you know, some placements, and I won't say specific program names, but are around $70,000 plus a bus for transportation, plus in some cases a paraeducator. When you consider all of those costs for one student, and then you think about building a program that has the capacity to grow and adapt and change with our district to accommodate the needs of kids within our district, I think it's appealing financially and also just is an ethically responsible thing to do so that kids have a choice, that have an alternative learning need within our own district.
And what about transportation? Is that factored into the finance piece?
Yeah, so there's some additional information, I'll just let you know too. In the last page of the packet is a sheet that Christine put together. And also on the sheet that I handed out with the staffing, on the other side, there is a van. There's money built in to buy a special ed van for this program to be able to transport those students.
I thought each of the 3 schools have vans. Because we had bought the special ed vans when we were 3.
I don't think anybody uses it. Ours just sits in a parking lot.
No, ours has been going out.
Schools have vans.
We use ours.
So this would be a vehicle just for this program.
And I'm sorry, that is built in?
That is built in, yes.
And where is that built in?
It's
Is on the special ed side?
in special ed, it's under,
Van lease.
there's $10,000, it's on page 8. It's the first section in the middle, it says van lease, $10,000.
You're not buying much of a van for 10,000.
That's just 1 year's worth of,
Yeah, you may do it on payments.
So that's a
Just like you
lease.
finance a car, you can finance a van.
Can you do that?
How can the SU do that if you can't own?
You can't at that extent.
You can't own things, I
Oh.
thought.
Well, you're not owning it.
You're
Yeah, they
leasing
are.
it.
If you're on a lease, somebody's owning it.
When we lease copiers, we do leases.
Oh.
Can lease.
So you could only ever lease then?
We lease our property.
And they'll take it back and not send us a huge bill when we say we don't want it more than 2 years. I'm just asking, I mean, the copiers and such, this is just a
We can
bigger.
have assets, we just can't have real estate.
Right, that's my,
We have
We
assets.
own a van.
Well,
It's
the
old.
some of the vans in the schools may be owned by the SU. I'm not sure. They were bought through a grant.
I thought ours were,
Because-
each of our schools owned the van.
SUs can own buses, because isn't busing SU-wide, it's not owned by districts.
No, I believe so, but I'm not positive on
I'm
it.
pretty sure, having worked in another district that owned their transportation, which is why I know you can, lease a van, you can buy a van, you can finance, because other places have.
I know the 3 vans we have, each of the 3 schools own that van. And we pay for everything on it.
So when we look at the anticipated number of students for year 1, 6 to 8, 2 to 3 currently in alternative programs, how many students SU-wide are currently in alternative programs?
I don't know if I have it in front of me.
I do not.
I have,
don't know either, but I know there are 2 populations of students that we would consider are receiving an alternative kind of education right now. We have some students that are enrolled in programs outside of our district that we would like to bring back into our district, but we also have students who are receiving tutoring who could potentially increase their academic day if we had an academic program, alternative program where they could be enrolled that would be substantially different from the public schools. And for some of those students, that would provide a much more robust, higher quality education than the minimum level tutoring that they're receiving right now. So when Christine was talking to me about it, that was my understanding of the 2 types of populations that we might be looking at for placement in this program.
Okay, understood. I'd still like to know how many students we have in programs outside, because we just heard, we know just from looking at our budgets and warrants at what outside placement is. So when you talk about 2 to 3, and we talk about cost-saving measures, I'd like to know in total how many students we have placed outside the SU in alternative programs.
So,
I'll have Christine report on that at the next
Okay.
meeting.
And so 40,000 rent and maintenance, is it built in here in this budget, the total cost for this choice program? For these 2, 3, 4, 5 additional employees?
I'm sorry, what was the?
So are the
cost of
5
this
additional
alternative program.
employees, is
Okay.
this program completely built
Yeah,
into?
the staffing is, and the van lease is, so I do have the details. So the cost of staffing for the program is $282,000. The net cost that we have built into this overall budget is $50,000 after you subtract revenues and subtract the savings that we'll have from removing students from alternative placements.
That seems like a good investment.
So the actual cost in the budget would be $50,000?
The net cost
The
increase.
net cost would,
I'm sorry, but does that include the rent?
That does
No.
not include the
So
rent
it
yet.
could be like 90, well, I would say
We're,
40,000.
Christine's still looking into whether we can get a waiver. So the discussion that we had is that with the block grant coming along next year, it's the year after this budget, that the goal is to to do these types of programs, and she said that there's a possibility that we can get a waiver to have that be included on the special ed. And if that's the case, that would reduce the cost for rent from 40,000 to 17,000.
And is this a program that has to be, it's going to be housed outside of any of the schools? So we're looking at an additional building. And so when we say that, we're not just renting it, as we know, just with the SU office, we're going to need to retrofit it for safety, for technology, for all of those things. And is any of that to the $40,000?
There is
Or is that-
supplies and equipment built into the budget. I don't
Is
know.
it built in for
I
that
don't
particular
know.
program?
I don't know to what extent she built stuff in though.
With technology, generally, that's covered on their IEP. So there's federal money that usually is applied to tech equipment that supports an IEP goal. So we don't generally actually pay for that. I work with Christine and order equipment, along IEP lines. So that probably won't make it in the budget because, it'll be in a budget for a program, but it'll be,
Edit out.
it's funded, it's not funded through us or even locally. It's funded through their, IEP support requirements.
Does it need to be outside of an existing school building that currently exists?
I know Christine has talked extensively with administrators in the amount of space that we're talking about, especially with the potential to grow the program. Currently, she hasn't seen that there is a viable space.
So my issue with that, and I'm sure it's much more complex than I'm about to present it, Pulteney Schools, for example, half the enrollment that was there when I was in school in the same buildings. So you're talking hundreds of students difference, and we're talking,
3 or 4?
well, let's just say 20 bodies between students and staff. So,
That's definitely a local discussion and a question that, as board members, you could ask your principals. It's nothing that we can talk to. Because one idea is moving the central office to one of our schools if space available, which would have total cost savings if we were to do that. But from what we've been told, that there's no space in schools.
I have just, the questions I have left, I have to do an executive session. I can't.
It is shocking to me that even when you look at Proctor, and I hear that all the time too, that I can go back and there were over close to 400 students in that building. And now there's, let's say, 133, and you're out of space. I mean, at some point,
They expand.
the children,
Well,
the children have expanded?
no, the space,
The space is
They kind of
expanded?
take over more and more space, I think.
If space is available, someone's using it.
Well,
oh, absolutely, I totally understand that, right? But I mean,
That is.
But try to get them,
issues I've
yeah, but try to
addressed
roll
in-
them back,
The
they won't do
difference
it.
well,
between
I've
when
done
we
it
went
in
to
different
school and
industries,
now,
let's say, so.
I think
The
maybe we
fight I've had
can,
and lost.
Yeah,
You've got
it's one of
I think-
one,
intervention,
actually.
it's SLP, you've
As I was-
got all these
yeah.
other.
one thing that's happened in many of the schools.
That you have to house and have space for
I
those
think it's
children
a
to get their
discussion that
services.
I have to have an executive session. I've got a lot of
Okay.
questions, but,
We'll just,
I
We
just
could.
feel like the essence, and I was the one who said, bring this when you bring the budget, is good, but there's so many unknowns, and you're asking us to essentially just smile and nod, and that's a lot of money to smile and nod on. I think I would be more comfortable, and we have talked about this before we merged, we talked about this when we were just the RCSU. If you're going to pilot a program, pilot it in a building, pilot it with children, with existing staff. You may need some other staff, but to ask us to invest a significant amount of money, sign a lease, there are a lot of things kind of based on a hope and a prayer. And I'm not sure, and I have no knowledge, but you're asking parents then of students that are enrolled in alternative programs, and maybe they're not happy, maybe they want to leave, but to take their children from those programs and put them in a new environment that in a year may not be in existence. And so I think that, to me, that's a huge piece to think about. And I know how much it costs when we send kids outside. I read every document that comes in front of me. I'm sure I could probably quote you the numbers. But when we talk about wanting kids to be successful and being in programs now where perhaps they are and asking them to leave, and I'm sure it's much more in-depth and complicated in removing students. And placement then is difficult. What happens if we withdraw them from a program and in a year we don't have placement for them? That's a big piece when I listen to that.
Well, it's not only that, but the special ed in itself was for inclusion. For those children, those students can come to the school and be included in the everyday activities of the school environment. Now we're taking them back out and isolating them in a separate spot, which I won't get into my own feelings on this. And like you said, well, yeah, we don't, we may only have 3 or 4 the first year, but it'll grow. That's like the baseball. You build it, they'll come. And so you're going to take more and more kids out to fill this facility. I'm just not convinced that we're ready for it. I don't think, we'll talk in executive session. I just think.
Okay, if I could just respond publicly to maybe two of those things, and then absolutely there can be a greater conversation in depth. So there are some families who would like their students to come back closer to their hometowns. We have students who are being bused quite a distance, and they would like students to be served closer to home, but understand the necessity of an alternative setting for their specific students. The other piece to consider, and perhaps in greater length in executive session, is the extensive need of some of the students, particularly with emotional disturbance, that require a rather large response, when they are struggling, and the impact on the remaining students. So we have an obligation, obviously, to educate all students, and with using an existing space, that's a concern as well.
Well, and if the only piece I would say to that, when we originally started having this conversation, the goal was to have them in a building. The goal was to have a space in each building where students, for lack of a better term, of a like need could go. Not to withdraw them from Poultney, Proctor, West Rutland, or Middletown Springs, and have them be in a building, let's say in Castleton. That the goal was to keep them as close to their normalcy as possible. So I think there are some good things, but I think there are also some very unsettling, and what happens when that parent sends their child to this program and they're not happy? This isn't, and not to be disrespectful, but parents who have children in regular classrooms, general ed, you don't have the opportunity just to pick and choose if you're unhappy about things. So, that's.
That doesn't even concern me. I mean, we've had several.
There's a level of inequity there.
Right, oh yeah, but no, I said, Rutland Town has had its more than its fair share of these high needs, that it's easy between travel and these alternative programs that they're sent to, well over $100,000 a year for this one student. So I understand if the need is there. Right now, though, I'm looking at the increases, 523,000, 400,000, well, maybe not, maybe 350 after you rent the building or the room or whatever. Of that is this new program. I'm not convinced we're at the point right now that we need this new program. I mean, if we had, and we don't really want, but I'm just saying, I hope that we don't have these extra needy kids coming. Not that I'm saying they don't need help, they do, and I think they should go and get the help they need. But I'm afraid if we have 3 students right now that are high needs out there, that are getting the help they need in the specialized programs, they're getting the help they need. I'd rather see us pay $100,000 a student, $150,000, even though I realize they have to go outside the community, but they're getting the needs. I don't want to build a program that now we're going to take all the students with behavioral problems and start putting them in. We're taking them out of the school setting. They're getting away from family. They're getting away from friends. We're building an Allen Street campus, which I won't go into. But that's.
I think maybe we should move to executive session
Exactly.
to further that conversation.
I just have one question. What is the age that we're required to educate students to? Is it 22 or is it
Yes.
23?
22, isn't it? 22.
22.
I have just one closing comment that, in my opinion, is more appropriate if you're not in support of this program as the board members, that you vote to not include it in the budget or make a motion to strike it from the budget and leave the management of the special ed program to, they've put forth a suggestion, up or down. This is not efficient and it's inappropriate, in my opinion. So that's my suggestion to us.
Anything further on the line items for special education?
I have nothing further on special education. The last piece, which is real quick, is the bill backs. And those, as we talked about earlier, those are the portions of the ineligible special ed pieces, as well as the people who are contracted by the SU because they're partially grant funded. So that did decrease, and the main increase, or the main reason why that decreased, and these are listed under the summary of changes on page 2, was that preschool teachers and IAs used to be billed back, and those are no longer being billed back. They're now local, they've moved to the local budgets, and we've hired those case managers to manage the preschool, IEPs.
Can we turn to page 11 of 11? So is that our total breakdown of what we're looking at across the district? So I spoke too early in saying we were looking at paying money, am I correct? Am I getting money back this year?
Yes, you are, Matt.
No, Matt.
Well,
Getting a refund on your taxes.
The bill backs are going.
yeah, so the bill backs are going down, so it's less money you'll pay to the SU, but that expense has moved to your local budget, so you'll see that increase in your local budget.
Okay.
Not paying in grocery, just paying it in gas.
Yeah, so, I mean, the 2 main lines you want to concentrate on are on the central office and special ed assessments, and you can find those on the individual budget tabs as well.
Part of the thing with the bill back, though, is that by having it in your local budget, it's not a surprise. Like, we thought we were had this much of a surplus. Oh, whoops, here come the bill backs, and it goes away. It's really, to me, it makes it more transparent.
No, I'm just looking at it differently than what I saw for review last year and the previous year, as we're changing,
It
as
is
we're looking at
different.
this. So it's just a different look, and I'm trying to figure out, if I were to look at just our side right now, Rutland Town, and I'll leave anyone else to the questions on their district, but the, IRAS looks pretty clear. I mean, IRAS going up 10. They don't have the bill back issue going on there, so they can see pretty clearly they went up 10, which is a substantial jump for them. What is our jump that you think is at Rutland Town? I mean, after the bill.
Approximately 150,000 between special ed and regular ed. Now, some portion of that you'll see in a decrease in local expense for the VSBA and the in-service and infinite campus, but that is a small piece.
Anybody questions? Overview, your district? Anything further, Louis, before I think they'll continue on to executive session, but
Nothing further.
anything else? Anything else? I think we've covered the matter. We can go ahead and briefly adjourn to let everybody pack up, and then we'll go into an executive session. But is there anything anyone wants for future business? Anything else before we make that motion?
The next meeting.
Yeah, I was gonna say next meeting.
No, next meeting date. Thanksgiving, we're meeting at Thanksgiving. Who's bringing dinner?
I can't make it.
We have the 20th open if we want to do it a week earlier.
Is that a Wednesday also?
That's a Wednesday also. We've been reserving that.
I think that's a good idea.
Internally.
I make a motion that we move our November meeting date from November 27th to November 20th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Discussion.
Yep.
Just a quick comment.
Mm-hmm,
I
sure.
will not be able to attend on November 20th. I think we've already discussed the potential of Kristen Ross attend in my absence.
Okay.
Just, that's the only comment.
And is it going to be required we vote on this budget on the 20th?
I mean.
Be nice.
The further we wait, then we don't have solid numbers for your local budgets, and I know we run into issues with the SU budget in December with the holidays.
We're gonna have the exact same situation because the December meeting's on Christmas Day. How many people wanna come? I'll bring the turkey. No,
I think it's a week earlier, so
let's do it a week earlier.
I'm good to go.
And I'm not sure whether I'll be here, but I'll communicate with these guys. And
All right.
For the 20th.
I just think it's important that we know we're gonna have a
20th, I
quorum
will
on the
not be
20th
here.
we'll
then.
be here. Okay, so if necessary, I'll call in on the phone.
And it's important if you have things that you want changed in the budget, that you mention it now.
Yep.
You know, because without any suggestion, it's basically coming back as it was presented today. That's what I've heard. Am I wrong?
It was not much different unless we're gonna
Unless
have,
I get a
there's any kind
directive,
of
then
special ed.
yes.
Just
I mean, I make small corrections. I've made actually a few changes to this summary page. There was some issues with it. It doesn't change any of the assessments, but some of the totals were off. But, so I'll make those type of corrections.
Well, I would like to see the grant writer come out.
I would agree with that.
And if we need to put in, a line for, I don't know, $5,000 for a consultant, but I don't see the benefit of carrying that for another year.
But we
We
have
got two,
some,
straw poll, anybody else that's against the grant writer position? Just, I'm curious, so I know I got two.
I have some comments, but they're probably better for
Three,
executive
with Jim?
session.
So.
I abstain until then.
Until that point. Anybody else care to put in their opinion as the grant writer, whether it's in there or not?
well, we have people we're interviewing, correct?
Yeah, that's what I would.
And
Discuss
you
in
don't
executive
want them to come back and ask for positions once the budget's set.
We've been interviewing people for months now, it seems like, so.
Have we?
Well,
I think we should discuss it in executive session
Yeah.
under personnel.
Yeah, I agree.
well, we don't
I'm
have a
little-
current personnel.
No, that's fair
It's
enough.
part of a budget, so there's no personnel to discuss.
Well, yeah, I think so. I mean, the reason I say that is we were just discussing that her and Corrine may interview some candidates, but if that position's being terminated for next year's budget, then what's really the point for a half a year?
I think I need to go in executive session
And they-
before I make a definitive.
So that's exactly right, so we'll take that up in executive session. Anything else?
Careful here.
We got the date. Anything else?
Can we vote on the date?
What's that? Oh,
Call the vote.
sure. Anybody making a motion on that?
I already did.
Yeah,
did.
Lisa
Who seconded?
seconded.
You seconded that? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Make a motion to, would you like me to make a motion?
Please.
Or just a brief recess?
I'll just do it. Motion to enter into executive session based upon personnel, contract, negotiation issues. Those are the three categories that I can think of right now.
And who do we
By
need to have
consensus?
join us?
No, I'm just making a motion, so if someone wants to second that. Or you want to add on who's going to join us?
Yes, I would like that.
I thought, Kim, Lewis. Anyone else? Lisa, you want to? Yep. Lisa.
Second.
Judy?
Oh, darn.
All right, you're not going. No, you can't. You're
You're
option
probably
at that
putting
point.
Lewis also.
He said Louis. So
Yep.
the four of us.
I think we've exceeded our 10 minutes, so.
Yeah. All right. Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. You're all set.